Trade union policies should certainly aim to achieve real equality for disabled people. It's important to show solidarity amongst our colleagues globally, internationally, locally and regionally in order to look at shared commonalities in terms of what's happening in countries. So 78% of non-disabled people work, but only 48% of disabled people work, and this is in the UK. So this gap has not improved in 2008, since 2008 in the UK. So the stigma and ignorance means that only a third of people with mental health issues are working. The NHS mental health services has been cut drastically, and that is certainly linked to austerity within the UK. And we can't look at, disability rights without looking at the impact of austerity and where funding actually comes from and how services are being drastically cut. So when I say intersectionality, by that I mean that you can be a disabled person, but you may be a disabled person with a particular socio-economic status, from a different class background. You may be black, or in the UK we say black and minority ethnic. You may be part of the LGBT community, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. You may be young. You may be of a particular age. So we have to look at, when we're talking about rights for disabled people, again, you cannot look at things just in isolation, because disabled people are not just disabled people. There are many different facets and identities that make people up, and women may be disabled women may be impacted more or have particular barriers when it comes to decent work, because we already know that women face a different pay gap between men and women. So can you imagine what it's like when you're talking about disabled women? So there's a double jeopardy in terms of barriers and obstacles that they face when looking or seeking for decent work. So with those cross-cutting issues, and that's what I meant by intersectionality, bringing your whole, true, authentic self and being able to talk about being disabled woman, disabled LGBT, and so forth. But the other issues that we do need to think about is hate crime. Hate crime has risen, and again, for us in the UK, since the referendum votes and Brexit, we're not just looking at race hate crime, we're looking at hate crime in its entirety. So disabled people are facing hate crime, and that, as I mentioned, has risen. So there's also access to work. And it's access to good work. What programs are there? What access programs are there that are funded, well funded, to support disabled people? We're also talking about fair assessments to the fair assessment systems to benefits. So a lot of people in the UK who may be disabled, who are working, still feel that they need to claim in-work benefits, because that is to supplement the fact that maybe decent work for them is only 16 hours and that is all they can manage, but they still have to think about rent, mortgage, families. So if those fair assessments in the benefit system are not fit for purpose, it means that they could be penalised or they could lose out. So would it then be better for them to claim benefits in full rather than work if we are not looking at true a decent work? So there's effective work programs. We mustn't forget access to transports. Now, transport is a very big one, again, in the UK, because if buses, taxis do not make those reasonable adjustments, then how do we intend to get disabled people to decent work? We have to think about everything that we do, just like this meeting. If there was a disabled person who needed an interpreter, not just language, but sign language, or a panel typist, are we going to say, actually, no, we can't provide that because it's too much money? Because if we do, we run the risk of being discriminators ourselves. So it's really important that we think about how we reasonably adjust what we do within the workplace and also within our trade unions and the work that we do. So there's independent living, care and work, public life and media. And I put that down because what you find is that the stigma around mental ill health or around disabled people in the media, they can be portrayed as so negative. And we need to ensure that when we are telling our stories of disabled people, we're telling positive stories, or we change the narrative to ensure that we bust some of those myths around disability and impairments and the rights that people are seeking.